11 million COVID cases in the US and no signs of stopping. New restrictions across this country as the virus spreads and surges pretty much everywhere, plus growing calls from Republicans for the presidential transition to begin amid this public health crisis. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Monday, November 16th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, we survived the tornado warnings for our area last night.
I was going to say, did you see that or hear that?
I saw it. I heard it. It was crazy.
Just as I was getting ready for bed, I got the warning, seat cover now. And then I just looked outside the window and there was it was completely, it was amazing. I mean, why not? A New York City tornado in November, why not?
Well, it was one of the first major storms since we moved into this new house. And I was saying to my husband, I'm like, is this house going to blow down? It was very scary. I hadn't been really in a house or a house that's my house during a storm like that.
No, it's, you guys got to worry about trees falling down. I don't have that problem.
So he said, I think trying to reassure me, he said, well, the house won't blow down, which was so stupid anyway. But he's like, but a big tree could fall on it. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Okay.
Thanks,
comforting
Mike.
As I get into bed. All right, let's get to the news. It took 3 months for the U.S. to record its first million COVID cases, and then it took a week to record the last million, showing just how fast this virus is now spreading virtually everywhere. Washington and Michigan are the latest states to enact strict new measures to curb the spread. North Dakota, which has the highest rates of cases and deaths per capita in the U.S. and where hospitals are critically understaffed, finally instituted a mask mandate. Chicago is under a new stay-at-home order as of today. New York City schools, they're going to be open today as the city's positivity rate is staying below that 3% threshold. Parents in New York, though, protesting over the weekend, urging the city to keep schools open even if we do breach that 3%.
El Paso, Texas. That's where El Paso is really ground zero in terms of hospitalizations. There's these pictures of these refrigerated trucks that are now acting as temporary morgues outside the hospitals in that city. Well, businesses are reopening today after the city's stay-at-home order was actually reversed by an appeals court, a Texas appeals court. Nail salons, bars, restaurants, all allowed to open for indoor service. Just unbelievable, just absolutely insane to me, at least. The scary thing, Jill, and I don't mean to start the week on such a troubling note, but that's where we are, really. We've notched about 1.5 million cases in this country in the last 2 weeks, and those numbers have not been reflected in the hospitalizations yet, right? Because hospitalizations tend to lag by about 12 to 14 days. So these next couple of weeks are going to be really ugly, and I think people just need to sort of be prepared for some really ugly news, some really bad news. I don't know if anybody saw the pictures over the weekend, but the Ultra Music Festival, which is like this big techno, electronic music gathering that they have around the world, they had it in Taiwan this weekend. Just tens of thousands of people packed cheek to jowl at this big concert. And they haven't had community spread there in 200 days. So they've effectively squashed this thing. Just an amazing success story in that country, in Asia. Unbelievable, really.
Taiwan squashed it right away. They never really had a surge.
Yeah.
Because they just were so on top of it from the beginning. Arnie Duncan, the former Obama education secretary, he and his family have COVID right now. So his Twitter feed, and he's been tweeting about it, and it's been pretty interesting. One of the things he wrote that kind of got me, he says, I appreciate everyone's good wishes. So how did we catch it? I don't know. We wore masks, We socially distanced, we avoided crowds, we haven't had people in our house. And I'm sure whoever gave it to us felt that they did the same. COVID is in the air now. It's in almost every room that you enter. Something about that really spoke to me because it's like we're all trying to do the right thing here, but I don't know. It's it feels like it's everywhere.
And I have one of my good friends, his mom has been basically hunkering down since March, and she got it. It's like it's not just, it's not just the folks that are going out, raging at bars and going to restaurants. Like it really is everywhere. It's really scary.
But that doesn't mean you don't up your odds of not getting it by being
Of course,
extra
right.
precautious and wearing masks, etc. President Trump, meanwhile, reportedly has not attended a White House coronavirus task force briefing in 5 months. He reportedly does not read his daily memos about the virus, at least he doesn't read them daily. So the strategy from the Trump administration at this point appears to be just kind of wait for the vaccine. Throw everything at the idea of a vaccine, just wait for it and hope it comes sooner than later. And on that note, the creator of one of the most promising COVID-19 vaccines says that assuming that the shot is even 50% effective, he expects that life will return to normal by next winter. Ugur Sahin, one of the half of that power couple behind BioNTech, he estimates that the impacts from mass vaccinations will kick in over the summer and that life will get back to pre-COVID routines by around this time next year. More or less kind of what we've been saying. I actually thought it would be even a little bit longer than that. But, that's what we mentally have to prepare ourselves for at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, I still think it'll be a little bit earlier. I mean, I don't know. This guy obviously knows better than us. I mean, he's a scientist who created this mRNA vaccine technology. So I respect what he says. I just think that I'm sort of working under my own assumption that we have to make it to Memorial Day. I find it easier in these situations, just like I did back in the spring, to sort of set these kind of like mileposts in my brain, even if it doesn't actually work out that way. So I'm sort of thinking like, you got to get to Memorial Day. I do think that sort of like this nonsense about people not getting the vaccine is overblown. I think people are going to get it. I think the opposite problem is we're going to have, right, that there's not going to be enough of it to go around at first. Especially if it ends up actually being 90% effective, I think that a lot of people are going to really want it. And remember, not everybody needs to get it, right? We just have to have enough inoculations to get to the herd immunity threshold, at which point it starts to die out, the virus that is. And I think that's closer than we think. So I do feel good in the sense that we are in this sort of like last, the last long haul here. But I think we can get through it. We've made it this far, as I keep saying.
The real fear too is college kids come home right about now, and we know a lot of college kids have it. Many are asymptomatic. So then, do they come home? They're going home, right? They're spreading it. It's that in-house spread. And I was chatting with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the schools. A lot of teachers have college kids, right? So then teachers go. I mean, it's just we're all so connected, and you realize it when you're in the middle of a pandemic like this. Okay, so the pandemic's raging. Our nation's capital is in a state of utter paralysis. And for the first time, President Trump appeared to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the election, tweeting, quote, "He won because the election was rigged." But then he did make it clear he was not conceding. He kind of dialed back he didn't, the saying that Biden had won. But a group of 150 former national security officials had warned that the delay in the transition is creating a serious risk to national security. A growing number of Republicans, including former Trump advisors and current governors, are calling for the transition to start. Even, people who really support him say, let the transition start at the same time that the court system plays itself out. And what's the worst thing that happens, right? So Biden preps for it and he's ready. And then, in theory, Trump would stay on. I mean, like, there's no downside to allowing the new Biden administration to get ready.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm excited to live through a new paradigm where we have sort of like a president in exile that 40% of the country thinks is their leader. They've been doing this in South America for years. It's signs of a healthy democracy. Seriously, though, Jill, if you pay attention, you notice that none of the GOP heavyweights like Mitch McConnell are actually alleging that there was any actual big election fraud. They're merely sort of saying, like, let President Trump, play out his options, have his day in court. There's a big distinction there. And to me, I think it's even more unacceptable for holding this up because they really know there's no there there. There's just sort of about pleasing the boss's ego. But I do agree that, I mean, yeah, even if you believe that there's going to be some sort of legal thing that's going to keep Trump in office, which is not going to happen, yeah, at the very least, let these guys get their briefing books and their email addresses and their office space set up. It's just really unfortunate that we're going in what, third week of this now without any cooperation. Also, I did want to mention one thing, Joe. Despite leaders from both parties, including the Speaker of the House, President Trump, and President-elect Biden, all calling for major new economic stimulus package like ASAP, negotiations have not resumed since the election. So you talked about how there's paralysis in D.C. Yeah, we can't even get negotiations on this COVID package that pretty much everyone believes we need at this point.
And especially if we did have to shut things down again, it could potentially be a lifeline for some of these businesses to at least just get through until there's a vaccine. We have to mention tens of thousands of people did embark on DC this weekend, pro-Trump supporters, with signs that said things like, stop the steal about the election. So to your point, this is a real divided country. And if Joe Biden, when he takes office in January, it's going to be a tall order to try and figure out how to bring everybody back together in the middle of a pandemic, especially. And one of the issues that a lot of national security experts are calling attention to is the idea of the vaccine distribution. The Biden administration and the Trump administration have to get on the same page about this, because this is such a big thing to get this vaccine when it's ready to be distributed. It is a difficult task in the best of situations. And Biden's Ron Klain, who's going to be Biden's chief of staff, he was on to Meet the Press, and he was talking about it. Like they need access to stuff just so that when assuming the Trump administration leaves office January 20th, January 31st, that there's no lag time, that they could just keep things running. A big story.
We should do I'm just making a mental note. We should do a deep dive into the logistical hurdles of the vaccine distribution. It's really interesting because at least the Pfizer vaccine, it needs to be stored at this really cold temperature. But there's some really fascinating stuff, really inspirational stuff, actually. It's been happening right now behind the scenes in terms of getting this massive logistical challenge underway. So mental note to myself, we'll talk about that one day this week.
Okay. A big story overseas that broke on Friday we wanted to make note of. Israeli agents acting on behalf of the U.S. reportedly assassinated Al-Qaeda's second in command in Tehran back in August, Abdullah Ahmad Abdullah, a.k.a. Abu Muhammad al-Masri. He was killed along with his daughter, in this drive-by shooting. Masri was believed to be the mastermind behind the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Africa and also a top lieutenant to Osama bin Laden, until he fled to Iran after 9/11.
Yeah, this is actually first of all, good riddance, obviously, but interesting because Iran is Shia and Al-Qaeda is Sunni. So it's a little bit odd that he was hiding out, or not even hiding out, just sort of living his life in Iran. These guys usually don't go there because they're bitter enemies. They hate each other, really. It's also a little bit interesting. Al-Qaeda hasn't acknowledged this guy Masri's death. They usually do by now. I'm not saying that's a reason to suspect that he wasn't actually killed. The reporting, this was broken by the New York Times on Friday and corroborated by the Washington Post over the weekend. So I think it's pretty solid, but interesting nonetheless.
Once again, the active tropical storm season is in the news. The 2020 hurricane season officially ends in 2 weeks, but it's still going strong. Hurricane Iota rapidly strengthening over the weekend, becoming the 30th named storm and the 13th hurricane of this record-breaking year. I mean, I'm learning all these new letters of the Greek alphabet.
Don't you remember? You were in a sorority, weren't you?
I was, but I never did the.
That was one of the things we had.
Alphabet.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we had to do during pledging. So I was like, iota, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Now I forget, but I used to be very good at that. Not that it has any value in regular life, except for I guess this. Except except for when you have 30 hurricanes a year that you have to report on. But yeah, in all seriousness, this is a big one. The storm Iota is a Category 4 hurricane headed for a potentially catastrophic landfall along the Honduras-Nicaraguan coast, likely later today into tomorrow. This region, remember, they're still recovering from a humanitarian crisis in the wake of Hurricane Ada, which was just 2 weeks ago. So we got to keep an eye on that this week as well. Hopefully this is the last one of the year. Like, my Lord.
Please. Okay, in sports, Dustin Johnson, the #1 golfer in the world, has won his first Masters green jacket and second career major. The 36-year-old American dominated the back nine on the fourth round at Augusta for a 5-stroke victory. That is the widest margin since Tiger Woods back in 1997.
Tiger Woods, by the way, he was looking strong in the beginning of the Masters. He had a very strong first round, but he fell out of contention, I think, on Saturday. Ended up with his worst single-hole score ever. Get this, he shot a 10 on the 12th hole at Augusta. A 10! Jill, I could shoot better than a 10 on a par 3. And I'm not Tiger Woods.
From what my husband was explaining to me, something about the way so having to do with the weather, he was forced to basically play, like he was playing really well, and then they had to take a weather break, and then he had no time in between his first round and his second round, and his back was starting to bother him.
Yeah, it's all about momentum. If you sort of get out of the zone because of the weather, you're screwed.
Okay, speaking of the weather, a day after it was scrubbed because of the weather, SpaceX successfully sent 4 astronauts into orbit on behalf of NASA in a dramatic nighttime launch from Cape Canaveral. The 3 men and 1 woman crew are now en route to the ISS in a SpaceX capsule that they dubbed Resilience, in a nod to the events of this year.
Very cool. Last night, if you got a chance to see this, they very rarely, like you said, they very rarely do these things at night. So it's kind of cool to get to watch it from that perspective. Missing from attendance at Cape Canaveral, by the way, Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, who is quarantining, likely with a mild to moderate case of COVID-19. He, of course, has been sort of I don't know if I could call him like a COVID truther, but he's been very skeptical about the virus from day one, and now he appears, at least, to be infected.
And if you are in the market for a new show to watch, the highly anticipated 4th season of The Crown dropped on Netflix yesterday. It's the first season to feature Princess Diana and Margaret Thatcher and monarchy storylines that are familiar to most people who are alive today.
Have you started? You're a Crown person,
I did.
Right?
I watched I love The Crown, and I've watched the first 2 episodes, and I'm loving it. It's great because like we just said, it's kind of storylines that you're familiar with, but you don't know the whole behind the scenes stuff.
So my question is, can I start it from season 4? Like, if I started it, I would understand what's going on. Yeah.
Yes, I think that you can. However, I would watch. I thought all 3 seasons were phenomenal. And so given the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic and things are going to get worse and you're not going to leave your house probably for, the winter, you can start the 4th season, but I'd say just start from the beginning because it's awesome. You'll learn so much and it'll be that much better because you'll be familiar with the characters. Yeah. They do change the actors and actresses that play a lot of the main characters. So it's not like it's an adjustment when they sometimes go to the next season and it's a different person playing the queen. But
Thatcher's played by what's the
Gillian Anderson.
Yeah, she looks amazing in that.
She's so good. I'm loving this. I'm loving this 4th season, and I've heard from critics that it just gets better and better. But like I said, you could totally jump in and watch the 4th season, but I would just start from the beginning because it's awesome. You're going to learn so much, and then the 4th season will be that much better.
Okay, I got to talk to my wife. This is a big issue in our house, is trying to figure out what our show schedule is. Right now, we're in the middle of rewatching Sopranos, which is taking up a lot of time, but it's worth it. And we're watching this Undoing show on HBO. But I'd like to get this one in there. I think we could do 3.
I think start The Crown from the beginning and just binge it and go with it. Okay, let's do some predictions for the week. Okay, last week I can't believe how wrong I was. I predicted that the market was going to tank. I said not a full-fledged correction, but a couple of really rough days. I was so wrong about that. Markets actually had a great week, and it started basically after we went off air on our Monday podcast, right about 2 minutes after I'd made the prediction. Pfizer came out with that news about the vaccine, and the markets ripped. So I was like, I actually should get negative points for that one because it was so off.
Now you know how I.
This week, however, I'm going to predict a little bit gravely that I think we're going to hit 200,000 new cases a day of COVID in this country. It was a couple weeks ago I had 200,000 new cases per day. A couple weeks ago I had predicted 100,000 new cases per day, and that was considered kind of like wild. I thought it was there was no way we were going to hit it so soon. So I think 200,000 seems far out, but I think we're going to be there. And the scary thing about that, and I know we have to wrap, is just what does that mean? It means 3 weeks late. What does that mean 3 weeks later in terms of hospitalizations and deaths? And that's what's so frightening about it.
Well, we're in exponential spread right now, so it's not that. I don't think it's that crazy to think the 200,000 is right around the corner. Okay, for my part, before we go, last week I predicted that President Trump would go to Mar-a-Lago and basically stay there through the transition, never admit that he lost the election. So I'm giving myself half a point for him refusing to admit he lost. He has not decamped from Mar-a-Lago yet, but I am re-upping this prediction because I think he'll probably go for Thanksgiving and then just kind of stay there through the transition. But this week, off of politics for once, my prediction, I think Moderna is going to release their results of their mRNA vaccine. This is going to be similar to the Pfizer vaccine. I think it's going to also show 90% or thereabouts efficacy. So we are going to be, at the end of this week, I predict, on the cusp of two majorly effective COVID vaccines, which is going to make that issue of distribution a little bit easier. So I think markets are going to rally on all that. So we will see. As of now, quickly, our score 2.5-1. You're still in the lead, but I'm starting to gain on you, Jill. So I don't know what's going to happen when I finally beat you.
I was going to double down on the market prediction and say that I think they're going to tank this week. However, I think you're right about Moderna, and I think that'll save them.
We'll find out.
We'll see. Okay, everybody, that's what you need to know for Monday, November 16th.
Have a good day, guys.